Let's don't let that out. Where does that fit? Lord, you're answering my questions, but what am I supposed to do with this? I'd rather us hang than deny our faith in Jesus. Father, emaciated bag of bones, and I'm so proud of you, Father. And he was 8 years of age. He said, Nick, do you know what it's like to grow up for 10 years with your daddy in prison? You see, I went looking for tools from God. And what I found was the resurrected Christ himself. And then we go to China, where for the past almost 60 years, the church had thrived in an atmosphere of persecution and repression. And I remember it's the only place in the world that I've ever had culture shock. I had time as I'm waiting for a house church guy to come find me. They just told me to go to a certain city and go to a certain meat market, and someone will come up to you there. And you know, I'm a good old meat and potatoes boy from Kentucky. And I go in the meat market of China, and the only food I recognize is seahorses. And I feel so tall, and everywhere I go, I guess people thought I was giving them the evil eye, especially older women. I'd look at them, they would hawk and spit on the ground, you know, and make me feel like, you know, that I wasn't very welcomed. And the house church guy would come up and tap me on the shoulder and say, come get in the van. And they drove me 18 hours. And I wake up 18 hours later inside of a compound, you know, walls about this thick and about 10 feet high. And it is a Chinese farming house where you build concrete walls, and then you build the individual rooms in the wall. And then you have an open dirt space where they cook and where they have trees and different things. And all of a sudden, I'm in the midst of about 150 to 170 house church leaders, men and women, church planners, evangelists. For 4 weeks in China, for the most part, I slept in a bed about this big, and almost every night with 3 or 4 Chinese men. You know, to wake up and one guy's arm is across my chest and another guy is giving me the Abrahamic blessing, you know, I did not find that edifying. 40% of the house church pastors had been in prison for 3 years. They consider prison in China their seminary. It's their theological institution. They don't really trust you until you've been to jail. They said, Dr. Nick, our seminary in China is prison. How many degrees would you like to get? So on the first day of this house church gathering, I did life-changing interviews. And after those 3 interviews, about 10 hours, the leader said, okay, Nick, no more interviews. And I thought, oh my goodness, my heart about stopped. And he saw my face and he laughed and he said, oh, don't worry. We're learning so much from you. We want to now let you do the rest of the interviews in front of the 170 people here. And I said, I'm good to go with that. And they put me out on a platform about this high with my interpreter. And I began to interview the people in front of one another. I want them to tell me their story. They said, no, wait, we've got to find out something from you first. Now, this is in the bigger group. We've got to know. I said, what is it you've got to know? Has Jesus made it to other countries, or has he just made it to China so far? Now, that's isolation. That's a bamboo curtain of concrete. I don't think that house church people in China in those movements will ever be Baptists, because when I told them about Jesus getting to other countries, they danced and they sang and they hugged and they kissed one another for about 15 minutes. They were so thrilled that Jesus had made it to our country. I interviewed this brother and sister that sort of redeemed the time, but not anything near the quality of what I had done for 12 hours in that quiet room. And, I'm not really happy with God. And I step down off the stage and they say, where you're going? Well, in my mind, I'm going to get in the bed before the other four guys do. And they say, where are you going? I said, I guess I'm not going anywhere. As I step back on the stage, they said, we've told you, we asked you if Jesus has made it to other countries, and you said yes. And we asked you if they were persecuted like us, and we want to ask you again about people in other countries and how they're persecuted. And I chose to tell them about what had happened to Somali believers and how they were wiped out. And as I told them about the depth of the persecution, 150, 170 people sat as if they were carved from stone. No expressions, no sounds, nothing. And I thought, wow, this was a big hit. And I stumbled off the stage and made it to that small hut of a room and that small cot, and I just fell asleep until about 6 o'clock in the morning. I hear all of this yelling and screaming and noise, and I go, oh no, there's too many people here. We've been here too long. The security police have found us. They're going to jail, and I'm going to go back to Ruth. They're going to throw me out of the country. And so I go rushing out of my little room, and there's no policeman there, no outsiders there. There's just all these brothers and sisters sitting and laying on the ground, and they're holding their heads and they're holding their chest, and they're pulling on themselves, and they're rocking and wailing. And I look at this, and I go over to my interpreter, and I say to him, what's going on? And he said, Nick, just listen to what they're saying. I said, I don't speak any Han Chinese. I don't have a clue. He said, just be quiet for once. And he took me by the hand, and we started walking among the people, but I could hear them crying out, and they're crying out, Somalia, Somalia, Somalia. And the interpreter looked at me and he's crying. He said they were so moved by the stories of believers in other countries that are really persecuted that they promised God they would get up an hour earlier every day the rest of their life to pray for the believers in those countries until Jesus was known throughout those countries. There were about 400 to 700,000 people who were considered believers in various churches and denominations when communism came to China in 1948. I remember reading an article in 1983, when we get back into China, or China opens up, will there be any believers, any churches left in China? And when we got back in, we found that 400,000, 700,000 believers in Jesus was now 10 million. And so they've learned how to not just survive in persecution, but they thrive in it. This is not a secret church. You can't hide what is currently 85 to 100 million people. This is an illegal church, but it can't get legal. It can't get registered. But in many places, it so blesses the peoples of the community, including the authorities, that the authorities will come to house church leaders for help to settle disputes. Why have they become 400,000, 700,000 to 100 million? They said, we've got a decision that we make every day. we can ask ourselves this question. Do I want to identify with believers in persecution, or do I want to identify with their persecutors? And when you ask them, well, how did I determine who I identify with? They say, by whether or not today you share Jesus with someone else or you keep him to yourself. And in America, I hear all the time, religion, faith in America is a personal matter. That's from Satan. And so what believers in persecution have said that's brutally honest is, when I keep my witness from my brother in America, my father, my sister, my boss, then I am identifying with the persecutors because I'm keeping my witness to myself. Listen, I'm doing these interviews in the year 2000. Now, I don't know where he gets his information, but James Merritt said 90% of Southern Baptists born in the church, raised in the church, saved in the church, baptized in the church, married and buried in the church, 9 out of 10 will never share Jesus with another person. That's what's killing believers in persecution. They are saying, you are giving up in freedom what we never give up in persecution, and that is our witness to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And they said, here's a mistake you're making. You think that witness is tied to political freedom, and that is so biblically incorrect. I am as free to share Jesus in Saudi Arabia today as I am Kentucky. I am as free to share Jesus in Afghanistan as I am in Ohio. Politics, countries, presidents have nothing to do with this. God has said you are free and you are to share the gospel with everyone. When we are obedient and exercise our freedom, then do we have the courage to suffer the consequences.
So for them, this commandment meant more than taking a day off. It represented freedom for God's people, because only those who are free can choose to take a Sabbath.
I'd like to tell you about the toughest man I think I've ever met. I can't locate him any closer than Central Asia because he lives in one of the toughest places on the planet. Now, he agreed to meet me if I would meet him in a third country. He would set up the interview, and the deal was I wouldn't try to see him. I wouldn't try to identify him. I would never ask for names, and I'd say, good, you're in charge of all security. And so I say that he's the toughest man I ever met because years ago, when another foreign country invaded his country in the name of Allah and for Islam, he led a squad of 15 men to fight off the invaders. And he said to me, Nick, I took great joy when I could come up behind a foreign soldier, an invader, when I could cut his throat and let his blood go over my hands and my arms as an offering to God. I was just so engrossed out by the story. I said, you have any clue how many people you killed? He said, well, I stopped counting at about 150. And he said, at night I would dream and there were spots of blood in my hands in my dream. And in successive nights when I dream, the blood would grow until the blood is covering my hands, my arms, and dripping down my elbows. And he said, I really knew I was going insane when I saw the blood during my waking hours. And I recognized it as the blood of those hundreds of people that I'd killed. No amount of washing or scrubbing. He said, I used sand, I used soap, and no one else could see it, but every day, every night, the blood, nothing would take the blood off. And he said, then one night the dream changed. And there stood this man clothed in white, surrounded by a bright light. And there were scars in his hands and scars in his feet. And there were these scars on his head and in one of his sides. And he said in Arabic, I am Isa, Messiah. I am Jesus, Messiah. if you find me, I can get the blood off. And the dream ended. And he wakes and he starts a 6-month journey to find Jesus the Messiah. We're not there. For 2,000 years, we haven't been there. There's little or no access to any Bible. There's no way to find a pastor to talk to, and so he's having to piece together a piece of the gospel here and a piece here and a piece here, and he did that for 6 months until he found Jesus the Christ, and he took Jesus into his heart, and Jesus immediately took the blood away. He wanted his other countrymen to have Jesus like he had Jesus, and he began to smuggle Bibles and Bible portions and Jesus films in his country. And one day he came around one of those corners in the mountain, and there's the men he used to lead. And they've been looking for their old commander. And in those 15 men was a follower of Jesus Christ, only known to God. And that man stepped forward and said, we're being stupid. If we kill our old commander here, we won't know who he's working with on both sides of the border. So let me take him to the nearest town and patch him up, and then you can come and torture him little by little by little to expose the traitors to Islam on both sides of the border. And after a few tense moments, they reluctantly agreed. So he took him to the nearest town, patched him up really quick, tied him on the back of a donkey, and smuggled him over the mountain into a third country. And this brother is still now doing the work of the Lord. He is the toughest man I have ever met. Ruth and I have now done enough of these interviews to hear what people are not saying. And he had told me that he had a wife and 3 kids, that he had led them to Christ, that he had baptized them, they were believers, but they never appeared in the 6 hours that I stood behind that bare light bulb. And so they never showed up in the story. And I thanked him for the life-changing story he had told me and for being such a brother in Jesus. I said, but before we go, can I ask you, how does your wife help you in your ministry? How do your children, how do they serve alongside of you? And folks, I can tell you, I was terrified because this brother broke every rule he had set. He leaped to where I'm standing behind that bare light bulb, and he grabs me by the shoulder and he begins to shake me, and all that's in my head is, oh, this dude killed 150 people, and now I'm going to be 151. But then he gets in my face and he says, how can God ask it? I've given him everything. My body's been broken. I've almost froze to death. I've been arrested. I've been starved. And he says, when I go to bed at night, that which I fear the most is that God may ask the same sacrifice from my wife and kids. And he looked at me and he said to me, Nick, how can God ask this of me? What do you say? I told him about Timothy dying in Kenya, buried at the school there. And I said, my wife is in Kentucky and she's safe. And one son is in university and the other son is with my wife now. And I've never lived like you've lived, but I've just got to ask you one question. And that is Jesus worth it? I said, is Jesus worth your life and the life of your wife and the life of your children? And the toughest man I ever met wrapped his arms around me. I mean, he just like a falcon. There's just muscle, and wiped his tears away as if in anger. And then he pushed me away and he said, I'm going to go get my wife and my kids, and I've got to get them involved in what I'm doing for the kingdom of God, because Jesus is worth it. The toughest man I ever met gave me the question, maybe the only question that matters for believers. And sadly, when we ask most in the Western church, is Jesus worth my life and the life of my wife? And is it appropriate to take risk with your children for the sake of the kingdom of God? And the answer has been overwhelming silence. Or it's been no. You don't do that with your wife and kids. I remember going to Ruth after Tim died. And you know, all this stuff is in pieces around us. And I said, we've given one son for this stuff. Do we risk our other two boys? And you know, in that time of brokenness, we said to each other, to say that Jesus is not worth it is to waste Tim's sacrifice. And so we don't know where we're going to find the health, and we don't know where we're going to find the courage, and we don't know where all the pieces are coming back together. But we will hold on to Jesus until Jesus proves otherwise, that he's not worth it.
God showed us that he wasn't going to waste Tim's life. And he reminded us over and over that he would direct us and he had a purpose for our lives.
You see, coming out of all of that Somali stuff and the really hard question that we were asking believers in persecution all over the world is, was Jesus worth it? And the toughest man I ever met answered that question for us. That man standing among 1,500 hardened criminals with his hands raised facing the east, singing his heart song to Jesus. He proved to us Jesus is worth it. That emaciated skeleton of a pastor tortured by the KGB, his 8-year-old son taking his hand, saying, Dad, I'm so proud of you. That family is saying, Jesus is worth it.
We knew the risk and we knew the cost. But Tim's life and death was worth it because Christ's life and love was worth it.
I want to ask my church in America and my family in the West and the churches that love Ruth and I, is Jesus worth it? What risk are we willing to take for the kingdom of God? And do we know that to get to resurrection, it's almost always preceded by crucifixion? But if the resurrection is true, it changes everything. And the gospel continues to be authenticated because of what people are willing to suffer for the cause of Jesus Christ.
О Боже, Боже, дай мне силы за ближних душу полагать, и в сердце вечно до могилы врагам обиды все прощать.
Yay. So there it is, folks. 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, I asked you a question. I asked you, is Jesus real? And we were all very hesitant to answer that question. And so I'll ask you again, is Jesus real? Yeah. And then tonight, the question was, is Jesus worth it? And I ask you that question, is Jesus worth it? I hope you would answer emphatically yes. So some awesome stories that we watched. I want to hear from you for a second before we get into what we're going to look at tonight. What stuck out to you in the video? Trey? Yeah, she went back whenever he went to Russia, because whenever the son died, she went back to the States and he went and did the Russia stuff. Yes.
When they were worshiping and preaching to the catacomb, they were put their hands up.
Yeah, we talked about that at camp a little bit, didn't we? About how sometimes we're super hesitant to do that in church. Yeah, they were freely worshiping. Yes, Aubrey. Himself, where he was, yes. Yeah, he was definitely in a foreign country during that. All right, who else? Yes.
I also noticed when we saw Ruth again at the end, there was someone else with her. Is that her son?
Yes, when the picture when Ruth is there, yeah, the son is grown up. One's in college, the other is at home with her, is what he said. Yes.
I liked how they showed the son dreaming and
Yeah, that was pretty awesome, huh? Any of the stuff that they said that really stood out? What about when he was talking about Christianity in the States versus Christianity over there? Did any of that stick out to you? Garen, what'd you hear?
They said that persecution was on the regular.
Yeah. What did he compare it to? Do you remember?
The sun rising every day.
Yeah, the sun rising. I'm not going to pick on my daughter, but sometimes watching the sunset is a really special thing. Those of you that went and watched the sunrise at camp, it was really awesome to see it come up. But we don't every day wake up and go, oh, hey, get outside. We got to get outside. The sun's coming up, right? But if someone marched in here right now and tackled all the adults in here and said, you're not allowed to tell people about Jesus anymore, that would be pretty big for us, wouldn't it? For them, it was an everyday occurrence their whole life. Right? Anything else?
At the end of that, I remember in the first video, it started off with that guy walking through.
Yeah, did y'all catch that? That guy at the very end was the guy from the very beginning of this video. Really, really stood out.
How the toughest man or whatever said, like, how can God ask me to, like after everything I've sacrificed, how can he ask you to give up a thing?
Yeah, to bring your kids in. That part always gets me. He said he killed 150 men. I thought I was going to be 151. I was like, oh, Lord, yes. He was really scared. But yeah, to sacrifice more, yes.
I thought it was neat how he was about to touch the sky, was about to die, and then that one guy was like, hey, let's not do this, let's do it somewhere else. And then he stripped them out.
Did that sound eerily familiar to anyone from a story in the Bible? The guy was about to be killed, and one person says, hey, why don't we, I don't know, do something different with him? Yeah, that was so close to that story when I was watching that. His brothers are like, let's kill him, and the one brother's like, hey, let's sell him into slavery because that's way better than killing him.
Did that guy, did he go back and saved him?
I have no idea what happened with that guy. Yeah, it would.
If he went back, they probably killed him.
Yeah, if he showed back up, it was probably not a good deal. They're probably looking for their commander. All right. Anybody else? Any of the? Yeah, that was the actual recording of the guy from Russia singing that heart song. I thought that was pretty amazing. Adam, can you learn some Russian?
Can you imagine over 1,000 people singing that?
Yeah. Enough to stop the guards is what that was. That was, yeah. Like, they know my song. Yeah.
But it's like, I like Russian language anyway. Like, hearing the entire president sing that,
Yep.
it puts it in perspective what the guards were thinking. Like, that's
Yep.
Like the guards just like, how'd this happen?
All right.
You had to think for them to memorize all that? They'd have to be listening for a while.
Yeah, they've got to have heard it every morning when he got up. That meant he had to be faithful every morning to get up and sing that song. Yep. Yeah, he has nobody helping him. He's the Lone Ranger standing when everybody else is not.
What I always felt whenever they sang that song is how they're all like all harmonizing, like they sounded perfect. Like were they just
Well, this was a recording made later. That wasn't actually. They didn't actually have cameras in there when it happened. This made it. Yeah, this was a remake. The only real singing was the last part that you just heard. When that was the actual recording of him singing it. It was way worse, but it was. They got the gist of it. Anything else about persecution that stuck out in there? Anybody catch about the seminary? What's the seminary in China? Did y'all? Yeah.
how many degrees you got?
Yeah. How many degrees do you want to get, Nick? How many times do you want to go to prison? And that's where they learn about Jesus and about preaching and about theology is in the prison. I don't know how many pastors here would want to go to prison to learn. I mean, even the worst seminary is not anywhere near a prison. Anything else?
I think it was cool how his version of the toughest guy was different, from the guy in Russia, but how what where was he from? I guess they never.
Yeah, they wouldn't say where he's from because they didn't want to pinpoint where he was.
How he had his children and stuff. It spoke to the guy.
Yeah.
So in his perspective, he was the toughest man for
Yep.
his family.
Yep. That's pretty awesome. Because I told y'all that was my worst episode when the boy dies. That was the one that got me. That would be the hardest part of that. Not that I have a son, but one of my daughters. Something more to happen to them. All right. I'll take 5 more. There are lots of really good quotes about persecution. Did y'all catch any of those? What about the 90% thing? Did anybody catch that one about Christians in America? 90% of people, the guy, and I forget the guy's name that he quoted, but he said 90% of people who are born in the church, married and buried in the church, will never share Jesus with somebody else. And they said that's the only way. What did they say? That's the only way that they know the difference, right? Between somebody who sympathizes with the capturers and somebody, or the oppressors, and somebody who is being oppressed. Is the oppressed people are the one who are sharing Jesus with somebody else during their day. If you haven't done that during one day, you're identifying with the other people. How many of us have shared, you don't have to raise your hands, but how many of you have shared Jesus with somebody today or this week or even this year? And for me, the first time I heard that meant I was identifying with the oppressors, the people who are persecuting the Christians when I don't do that. It's our job to share Jesus with somebody every single day. That's pretty big. Somebody if the statistics are right, it means that only maybe 1 or 2 people in this room will ever share Jesus with somebody else. That's not a good statistic, is it? That's a pretty bad statistic. Do you think we can do better than that? I would sure hope so. I think you can do better. I feel like it's your parents' job and my job to help give you the tools to be better at that. And one of the things you can do in sharing Jesus is telling people about what he does in your life. That's why I want to encourage you to do that in here. And on Sunday mornings, when we get back to Sunday school, we'll get back to that. Y'all telling me something Jesus has done in your life in the past week. That's step 1 of telling people about Jesus, is opening up to your life. All right, one more thing. Anybody else? When I say that, I mean I'll take 5 more. Yes.
When people in China heard about people in Scotland, and the next one gets woke up an hour earlier, and they just started praying, and God was like,
Yeah, they were heartbroken over that, weren't they? And our hearts are so hard that we hear news like that and we just go about our day. We hear news about a group of people being murdered or a really bad accident happening, and somehow we just go on about our day. We don't even pause or blink. And they made a commitment to get up early every day in order to pray for those people and to make it a priority in their lives. All right, one more. Yes.
So when he was telling them, they asked, like, what does persecution look like in your country? And he chose to tell them about Somalia. And like he didn't tell them about the U.S. because there is
Yeah, he went with a better story, didn't he? With Somaliland and the things that were going on there. All right, so we've got just a few minutes here. Look at John 15. I'm just going to read this to you. It really speaks for itself, but I've got a few quick things I want to point out about it. So John 15, we're going to look at verse 18 is where we're going to get to. So chapter 15, verse 18. And those of you who have red letter Bibles, what color is this? It's red. So what does that mean? So this is Jesus speaking. This is not a missionary. This is not somebody who is a side note. This is the God of creation speaking. He says, "If the world hates you, understand that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. However, because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of it. The world hates you. Remember the word I spoke to you. A slave is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they also keep yours. All right. So what is Jesus saying is going to happen if we are believers in Christ? The world's going to hate you. And what else? And we're going to be persecuted. The world should hate us. If we get along and we're super cool buddies with the entire world, there's a problem. Either Jesus is making up some stuff, or we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. It also said that they persecuted Jesus, and they will do the same to you. If you go through your whole life and no one points out that you are any different, and in any way you have to suffer any kind of persecution, you might want to question whether you know Jesus and are living for him. All right? And why did they say that you'll be persecuted? Because of who? Because of Jesus, because of him. They're going to persecute you because of him. And what did we watch in this video? A lot of persecution, didn't we? A lot of people getting beat up. A lot of people having bad things happen to them. And the last question that they asked on there, and I want to tie into this, is Jesus worth my life and my family's life? And I don't want you to answer that out loud. I want you to think about it, because your quick answer is going to be yes. But an actual answer is whether you live that out or not. Are you willing to put your life, and that can mean your mortal life, your actual life where you live or die, or your life where you are the coolest one in the room, or maybe a situation that makes you change the course of your life and what you're doing, and eventually your family's life. Is Jesus worth both of those things? Is he worth putting those things on a lower list? And I just want to end with that. Is he worth it? Is he worth the persecution? And I'm just going to let you just pray and talk to God for just a minute and answer that with him. Tell God real quick, is Jesus worth it? And you can just answer that honestly with him. You can say, I don't know that it is. I don't know that living my life for you is worth it, God. I'm not there. God, help me to get there. And I guarantee you, he'll work with you. This guy that we just watched, Nick, he got to there a couple of times, didn't he? He said, I don't know if it's worth it. Even the most strong guy, the guy that was the most, what did he call him? The baddest dude, or whatever it was he could say. He said, the toughest guy, he said, is it worth it? Can I put my kids and my family in this situation? I want you just to talk to God for just a minute. We're just going to be quiet, and then I'll close this here in just a minute. But talk to God about, is he worth it? And if he is, what do you need to be doing different in your life? How do you need to be living different than what you are now? So just talk to God for a minute. Dear God, I just want to come tonight and just tell you that I believe you are worth it. God, I want to be willing to take my family and to take myself wherever you lead. God, I pray that you would help us all to have that thought process in our mind. God, help us not seek out persecution, but also not to run from it either. I know persecution in America looks nothing like it does in China or Russia or any of the places that we watched. But God, it also shows up in our school when we can be pointed out, or we can be chastised for talking about you, or even for living a different lifestyle, or maybe not going to a party because we know that things that are going to happen there are things we don't want to be a part of, God. God, help us to say you are worthy. You are worth it. Jesus, you are real. We believe in the resurrection. We believe in your death, and that, God, we look forward to being with you. But God, we pray for those that right now that are under this persecution that we can only imagine, and we can only sit in our air-conditioned room and watch videos about. God, be with those in Somaliland and those in China, the ones in Russia even right now that are suffering persecution, and in places we don't even know about. God, our heart breaks for them. Help us to be ready to minister to those people. God, I pray that you stir the hearts of these young people and make them ready to be missionaries in their life every day and to be open to your calling for the world. God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for Jesus, and thank you for allowing us to know you because of him. We ask all this in his name. Amen.